Hello, welcome back. Today I bring you news that made headlines in the year 2025 here in Kenya. Number 1, Haiti. The Kenyan mission in Haiti, officially known as the Multinational Security Support MSS mission, began in June 2024 to combat overwhelming gang violence. Led by Kenya, the mission has focused on securing critical infrastructure like the Toussaint Louverture International Airport and the main seaport, which had been paralyzed by gangs. What are the key developments on this Haiti mission in 2025? The mandate of the mission in October 2025, the UN Security Council expanded the mission's scope and renamed it the Gang Suppression Force, GSF. This shift granted officers more aggressive powers to neutralize and arrest gang members directly, moving beyond a purely supportive role for the Haitian National Police. By December of 2025, the first contingent of Kenyan forces or officers completed their 18-month tours and returned to Nairobi. They were replaced by fresh specialized unit, including Kenya's first all-female SWAT team. Despite some success in reopening supply routes, the mission has faced significant hurdles, including chronic underfunding, a shortage of equipment operating at roughly 30% capacity, and the difficulty of urban warfare against gangs that control 80% of the capital. Away from Haiti, we go to the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo. Kenya's military involvement in the DRC has evolved through two distinct phases: a regional-led effort and a subsequent UN integrated mission. The Phase 1 EACRF of 2022 to 2023. In November 2022, Kenya led the East African Community Regional Force EACRF stationed in North Kivu. The Kenyan contingent initially focused on creating a buffer zone between the Congolese army and M23 rebels. However, the mission faced severe criticism from the DRC government for being too neutral and refusing to engage rebels in direct combat. Following a breakdown in diplomatic relations, the DRC refused to renew the mandate and Kenyan troops withdrew in December of 2023. Phase 2, MONUSCO transition of 2024 to 2025. Despite the EACRF withdrawal, Kenya remained committed to regional stability. In August of 2024, Kenya deployed the 4th Kenya Quick Reaction Force under the United Nations Organization Stabilization Mission, MONUSCO. Throughout 2025, these specialized units focused on 1. Civilian protection, that is conducting aggressive patrols to secure villages from armed groups. Tactical readiness, that is engaging in joint exercises with other United Nations contingents like Nepal to improve response times. And 3. Humanitarian aid, providing medical support and security for aid corridors. Away from the DRC, we go over now to Sudan. Kenya's involvement in Sudan crisis has shifted from high-level mediation to a period of severe diplomatic tension throughout 2024 and 2025. Kenya initially positioned itself as a primary mediator under the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. President William Ruto chaired the IGAD quartet comprising Kenya, Ethiopia, South Sudan, and Somalia, advocating for an immediate ceasefire and a civilian-led political transition. However, the Sudanese Army Forces, SAF, repeatedly rejected Kenya's leadership, accusing Nairobi of lacking neutrality. In 2025, there was a fallout. Diplomatic relations reached a breaking point in February of 2025 when Kenya hosted leaders of the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, in Nairobi. The SAF-led government in Port Sudan viewed this as an act of diplomatic adventurism and a violation of its sovereign, and especially after reports emerged that the RSF intended to use Nairobi as a launchpad for a parallel government. In retaliation, Sudan imposed trade bans on Kenyan exports, including tea. The key focus of this mission in 2025 were the following: peace initiative, continued support for the Jeddah process and advocating for a 3-month humanitarian truce. 2. Humanitarian role, that is, managing the influx of thousands of refugees while navigating global funding cuts that forced a reduction in aid at camps like Kakuma. Regional stability, warning against external military support and fragmentation of the Sudanese state. Now, let us now jump over to the civil unrest here in Kenya. In 2025, Kenya experienced a resurgence of intense civil unrest, primarily driven by a youth-led movement protesting the high cost of living, government corruption, and systemic injustice. Protests and triggers peaked in June of 2025, marking the first anniversary of the historic 2024 anti-finance bill protests. While the core frustrations remained economic, a fresh wave of anger was ignited by the death of Albert Omondi Ojwang, a popular blogger and teacher, while in police custody. These Gen Z protests spread across 27 counties, with thousands of demonstrators demanding the resignation of the administration. Then came the abductions and police brutality. The state response was characterized by what human rights groups called extreme repression. Security forces utilized live ammunition, rubber bullets, and water cannons. The Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, KNCHR, confirmed at least 19 deaths from gunshot wounds in late June alone, including high-profile cases like street vendor Boniface Kariuki. A culture of impunity grew as dozens of activists and suspected protest organizers were abducted by masked men in unmarked vehicles. Amnesty International and other bodies documented nearly 90 cases of enforced disappearances by early 2025, with many victims found tortured or dumped in mortuaries weeks later. Let us shift gears and look at the health care sector. Kenya's healthcare sector has been defined by rolling industrial actions as medical professionals demanded the fulfillment of long-standing government promises. The strikes primarily involved the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union (KMPDU) and the Kenya Union of Clinical Officers (KUSO). Clinical officers who striked between February and March of 2025. They launched a nationwide strike in February of 2025, that was on 25th. Their demands included the promotion of staff, the absorption of universal health coverage (UHC) staff into permanent terms, and the posting of interns. A deal was eventually reached in mid-March with Ministry of Health. Then came the Nairobi County crisis of March to April of 2025. Doctors in Nairobi staged a 39-day strike protesting illegal salary cuts, stalled promotions, and chronic pay delays. This ended in April after the county government committed to issuing 369 permanent appointment letters. Then there were renewed national threats of August to December of 2025. By August 2025, a nationwide health crisis loomed again as the KMPDU issued a 14-day ultimatum over the government's failure to pay 1.5 billion shillings in salary arrears from the 2017 Collective Bargaining Agreement (CBA). So, as of December, or as of just recently, 2025, tensions remain high. While some local wins were secured in counties like Kiambu and Nairobi, many medical officers claim the government has used bureaucratic delays to avoid settling arrears. The transition to Social Health Authority (SHA) also caused friction, with many doctors citing non-remittance of their insurance contributions. For a visual look at the negotiations, you just need to look at the news on this and how the health sector suffered. We shift gears now and look at something even more critical and controversial: sale of state-owned enterprises. The National Treasury announced the sale of a 15% stake in Safaricom to South Africa's Vodacom for approximately 244.5 billion shillings. While the government framed this as monetizing assets to seed the National Infrastructure Fund, critics labeled it a secret sale that locks out local investors. The deal reduces state ownership to 20%, giving Vodacom a majority of 55% control and raising concerns over the loss of a long-term dividend revenue. Moving away from that, we go look at the KICC. The proposed sale of the Kenya International Convention Center (KICC) remains one of the most emotive issues. In April this year, or in April 2025, the Court of Appeal upheld a block on privatization of 11 entities, including KICC and the Kenya Pipeline Company (KPC). The judiciary emphasized that these are national symbols and strategic monopolies that require deeper public participation before any transfer of ownership. Lastly on this, we have the Privatization Act 2025. Despite the judicial roadblocks, President Ruto signed the Privatization Act 2025 in October. This new law fast-tracks the sale of state-owned enterprises by centralizing power within the Treasury and a new privatization authority. Opponents, including former Chief Justice David Maraga, condemned the act as an economic war that risks auctioning off public heritage to a select elite. Next news item that captured Kenya's headlines is on transportation tragedies. In this year, Kenya faced a significant spike in transportation tragedies, with road fatalities reaching record levels and high-profile air and water incidents. Let us first look at road carnage. According to the National Transport and Safety Authority (NTSA), road fatalities surged to 4,458 deaths by early December of 2025, surpassing the previous year's totals. The festive season was particularly grim. On a single day in Tuesday of this December 2025, people perished in 16 separate crashes. And not just 16 separate crashes, but we lost 25 people in these crashes in just one day across counties like Nakuru and Kakamega. Human error, including speeding and drunk driving, remained the primary cause, leading to a massive multi-agency crackdown that flagged over 1,700 violations in just 4 days. On air crashes, in August of 2025, an Amref Flying Doctors Air Ambulance crashed into a residential building in Mwihoko shortly after taking off from Wilson Airport, killing 6 people, 4 on board and 2 on the ground. Later, in October, a Mombasa Air Safari flight en route to the Masai Mara crashed in Kwale, killing all 11 people on board, including 8 Hungarian and 2 German tourists. Then, on water transport, Lake Victoria remained a high-risk zone. In late December, 5 fishermen drowned near Usigu after strong winds capsized their vessel. Additionally, a racing boat tragedy in October off Mombasa's Tudor Creek claimed 4 lives during the East Africa Ocean Festival. Next item is the 2024 African Nations Championship, CHAN, that was held this year, 2025. The CHAN, delayed until August 2025, was a historic event as the first continental tournament co-hosted by 3 nations, Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda. Held from August 2nd to August 30th of 2025, the competition served as a vital dress rehearsal for the upcoming 2027 AFCON. Kenya hosted Group A matches and the grand final at Moi International Sports Center, Kasarani, following intensive renovations. The champions, Morocco, secured a record-breaking 3rd title after defeating Madagascar 3-2 in a thrilling final in Nairobi. Harambee Stars, under the coach Benny McCarthy, did so well, thanks also in part to President William Ruto's offer of $1 million shillings and housing to the players if they did well, and they did well. Kenya's local-based squad exceeded expectations. They famously stunned eventual champions Morocco with a 1-0 win in the group stage to finish top of Group A. However, their journey ended in the quarterfinals after a heartbreaking 4-3 penalty shootout loss to Madagascar following a 1-1 draw. Controversy surrounded that match anyway. The tournament was praised for reviving Kenya's football infrastructure, with Kasarani and Nyayo stadiums being upgraded to international standards. Then came the most heartbreaking news of the year, the passing on of Raila Odinga, which happened on October 15th, 2025. This one marked the end of an era in Kenyan and African politics. The 80-year-old veteran statesman died of a sudden cardiac arrest at the Devamatha Hospital in Kerala, India, where he had been receiving treatment for chronic kidney disease and recuperating from a mild stroke. Following his death, President William Ruto declared 7 days of national mourning. Raila's final journey was characterized by a blend of military honors and traditional rites. The funeral was massive. A massive state funeral service was held on Friday of October 17th at Nyayo Stadium in Nairobi, attended by thousands of mourners and several African heads of state. The burial, which was in accordance with his written will to be buried within 72 hours of his death, he was laid to rest on 19th of October 2025 at his ancestral home in Kango, Jaramogi in Bondo. The ceremony was led by the Anglican Church of Kenya, ACK, and included a private interment. His death had followed a year of significant transitions, including his unsuccessful final bid for the AUC chair seat in February of 2025. Raila's legacy remains that of a liberation hero who fought for Kenya's ultimate party, democracy, and constitutional reform. Next news item is the extreme weather. This year, Kenya's climate was marked by a volatile shift between devastating floods and severe late-year drought, highlighting a country's increasing vulnerability to extreme weather. Flash floods and landslides occurred in between May and September. The March, April, May long rains were exceptionally heavy, causing widespread flash floods that displaced over 300,000 people. A tragic dam burst in Mai Mahiu in May and claimed over 40 lives. Disaster struck again in November of 2025 when torrential short rains triggered massive landslide in Chesongoch, Elgeyo Marakwet County. This single event killed at least 40 people and destroyed over 1,000 homes after the region received 2.5 times its average historical rainfall in just 10 days. There was also drought, a climate phenomenon driven by La Nina and a negative Indian Ocean dipole suppressed rainfall across the arid and semi-arid lands as well. By December, counties including Turkana, Mandera, Wajir were in the grip of severe drought. Over 1 million people faced acute food insecurity. Pastoralist communities reported significant losses of cattle and goats due to depleted pasture. The drought exacerbated a cholera outbreak and an upsurge in visceral leishmaniasis in Marsabit and Wajir. Now, Let us look at education sector. Kenya's education sector faced a perfect storm of logistical hurdles, funding gaps, and intense labor disputes that touched every level from primary schools to universities. The most critical issue was grade 10 transition. In December of 2025, following the inaugural Kenya Junior Schools Education Assessment (Kizza), the Ministry of Education processed over 350,000 placement review requests. Over 66,000 appeals were rejected due to a capacity crisis in top-tier schools. For instance, over 50,000 students competed for fewer than 10,000 slots in elite Cluster 1 institutions. Away from that, but still under education, we have university lecturers. A 49-day nationwide strike by UASU and KUSU paralyzed public universities from September to November. It ended only after the government agreed to pay 7.9 billion shillings in salary arrears. JSS interns also made headlines. Throughout the year, JSS interns or junior secondary school intern teachers held protests demanding permanent employment. By December, over 20,000 interns threatened to down tools in January 2025, rejecting the government's plan to extend their friendship contracts to extend their internship, not friendship, internship contracts for another year. And then came the staggering 117 billion shilling funding gap in capitation, which was exposed by the Auditor General in July. This led to ghost school scandals and left many institutions unable to sustain basic operations or school feeding programs, particularly in the arid regions. Lastly, in this respect, we've seen so much of problems with Kizza, with the lecturers, funding, and even the interns. We hope that 2025 will be a better year for them. Now, a shift into by-elections that were held this year. In 2025, Kenya held a significant series of by-elections or mini-polls that served as a critical barometer for political temperatures ahead of 2027 general elections. And this is where Wamutende and Karish comes in. Gachagua versus Kindiki. The most consequential exercise took place on November 17, 2025, involving 24 electoral areas, including 6 national seats and a Senate race. These polls were necessitated by deaths, resignations, and court nullifications throughout the year. A National Assembly success, the broad-based government, a coalition of ruling UDA and the ODM, recorded a dominant sway, winning all 6 parliamentary seats. Ahmed Malim Hassan of UDA won in a landslide to succeed his late brother in Banisa. ODM successfully defended the seat previously held by Opiyo Wandayi in Ugunja. ODM candidates maintained the party's grip on its traditional strongholds of Kasipul and Magarini. The Baringo senatorial race saw the UDA candidate secure a decisive victory, further consolidating President Ruto's influence in the Rift Valley in the Senate race. The mini polls were viewed as a stress test for the newly reconstituted Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission (IEBC). despite some reports of voter bribery and tensions in Malava and Mbeere North. The IEBC utilized the results transmission and presentation RTS system to deliver provisional results quickly, which was generally praised for its transparency. The outcomes solidified the partnership between Ruto and the ODM leadership, while posing a strategic challenge to the fragmented opposition groups. Next item is the tree hugging marathon by Truphena. A 22-year-old environmentalist, Truphena Muthoni, became a national sensational symbol by setting a world record for the longest tree hugging marathon, using the feat to champion conservation and mental health. From December 8th to December 11th, 2025, Muthoni successfully completed 72-hour continuous tree hugging challenge outside the Nyeri governor's office. This surpassed her own previous record of 48 hours, which she had set in February 2025 at Michuki Memorial Park in Nairobi. To meet Guinness World Record standards, she remained in physical contact with a royal palm tree for 3 straight days without food, water, sleep, or breaks. At the 48-hour mark, she donned a blindfold for 3 hours to highlight the vulnerability of people with disabilities to climate change and blind government policy regarding indigenous forests. Muthoni's endurance drew support from across political divide, including Nyeri Governor Mutahi Kahiga, PLO Lumumba, and former DP Rigathi Gachagua. On December 15th, President William Ruto appointed her as an ambassador for Kenya's 15 billion tree planting campaign. Following her triumph, she was awarded the Head of State Commendation HSC, a full scholarship to Mount Kenya University, and a 1 million from a local betting firm. She describes her activism as a silent protest, urging Kenyans to fall in love with nature to ensure that the 2027 AFCON and the future generation inherit a green nation. Away from that and on to athletics now. This year, Kenya athletes asserted their global dominance, led by a historic performance from the women's squad at the World Athletics Championship. Faith Kipyegon, who is the queen of the track, cemented her GOAT status by winning a record-breaking 4th 1,500-meter world title. Earlier in the year, she shattered her own world record at the Prefontaine Classic, clocking an incredible 3 hour 48 minute and 68 microsecond, or is it millisecond, to become the first woman under 3:49. Beatrice Chebet also broke this year's record. At the Prefontaine Classics, she became the first woman in history to break the 14-minute barrier in the 5,000 meters, which she did in 13 minutes, 58 seconds, and 6 microseconds. In Tokyo, she completed a rare distance double, winning gold in both 5,000 meters and 10,000 meters. Emmanuel Wanyonyi, emerging as the sole male gold medalist in Tokyo, Wanyonyi clocked 1 hour 41 minutes and 86 seconds to win the 800-meter world title. He was later named the World 2025 Athletics Track Athlete of the Year. Kenya achieved a historic double also, by a podium sweep at the 2025 New York City Marathon. Benson Kipruto led the men's sweep, while Helen Obiri won the women's race, shattering a 22-year-old course record with a time of 2 hours, 19 minutes and 51 seconds. The highest of Beatrice Chebet's sub 14-minute world record showcases a historic moment. She became the first woman to ever break the 14-minute barrier in the 5,000 meters. Now, onto a gloomy side again. Deaths in the year 2025, other than that of Right Honorable Raila Odinga. One, we lost Professor Bethwel Allan Ogot on January 30th, 2025, a renowned historian and academician. We also lost Leonard Mambo Mbotela on February 7th, 2025, a legendary KBC broadcaster. And for those of my age, you would know J. Huu ni ungwana. We also lost William Cheptumo, Baringo Senator and former Baringo North MP, on February 16, 2025. Malulu Injendi also died on February 17, 2025. He was a former Malava Member of Parliament. Wafula Chebukati, the IEBC chairman of 2017 and 2022 elections, died on February 20th, 2025. Brian Chira, famous TikTok personality and influencer, died on March 16th, 2025. Charles Ongondo Were of Kasipol Kabondo, a Member of Parliament, died on April 15th, 2025. Ngugi wa Thiong'o died later in May 2025, a world-renowned author and literary giant. We also lost Roslyn Odede, chairman of Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, who died on June of 2025. Matthew Lempurkel, former Laikipia North Member of Parliament, died in August on 14th this year. Charlo Mbobu, senior lawyer and constitutional legislator, died on September 9th, 2025. Tibu Debu Muhammad, a notable public servant and political figure, died on September of this year. Betty Bayo, the 13th hour maestro, you know that. She also died on November of this year. KK Mwenyewe, a comedian by the name Zakaria Kariuki, died in November 2025. Bilal Wanjau, film and theatre actor, died on December 4th, 2025. Cyrus Jirongo, former Lugari MP and cabinet minister, died on 13th of December 2025. Justice Muhammad Ibrahim of Supreme Court of Kenya died on December 17, 2025. Victor Kirubi Thumu, a prominent businessman and public figure, also died on 17th December 2025. 2 days later, Regina Wanjiru Mudhira, former KMTC official and community leader, also passed on. May God rest their souls in eternal peace. Now on to ODM. The Orange Democratic Movement in Kenya is navigating its most significant transition since its founding in 2005, 20 years ago. Following the death of its longtime leader and founder, Raila Odinga, in late 2024, the party is facing several critical issues. One, the most pressing challenge is the vacuum left by Raila Odinga. While Odinga was appointed as an acting party leader to provide stability and Gladys Wanga serves as the national chairperson, a fierce internal succession battle is underway. Key figures like Edwin Sifuna, James Orengo, and Simba Arati are increasingly vocal about the party's future direction. Then comes the relationship with the government. ODM is currently at a crossroad regarding its alliance with President William Ruto's broad-based government. Pro-government wing argue for remaining in the coalition until 2027 to leverage state resources and development. The independent wing, on the other hand, including James Orengo, push for the party to return to its traditional role as the main opposition, to serve its identity and failed presidential candidate in 2027. Then we have matters coup in this ODM. There are rising reports of internal friction, with senior members like Junet Mohammed warning against coups from within. Additionally, younger members have criticized the party for allowing older non-youth leaders to hold positions in the youth league, sparking demands for better representation. The party is also struggling to decide whether to support President Ruto re-election or run a solo campaign. This uncertainty has led to mixed signals to supporters and potential instability in their traditional strongholds. Now, let us look at Kenya and Uganda relations. Kenya's involvement in Uganda elections, particularly ahead of the January 2026 polls, is defined by a delicate balance of regional diplomacy and domestic political spillovers. While both governments officially respect national sovereignty, several gray areas involvements persist. For instance, President William Ruto's administration has maintained a close relationship with President Yoweri Museveni. High-level state visits in 2025 have focused on regional stability and trade. However, Museveni's recent rhetoric regarding ownership of the Indian Ocean, a move to secure landlocked Uganda's interests, is seen by analysts as an attempt to project itself to his domestic audience before the election. The porous Kenya-Uganda border remains a flashpoint. In mid-2025, reports surfaced of hundreds of Kenyans crossing into Uganda to participate in local NRM village-level elections. While both governments dismissed claims of state-sponsored interference, these incidents fueled opposition claim of imported voters intended to tilt the 2026 elections or scales. Kenya has historically been a refuge for Ugandan opposition figures. In 2024 and 2025, the arrest and deportation of Ugandan activists from Kenyan soil drew international criticism, with many viewing it as Nairobi's silent support for Museveni's regime in exchange for regional cooperation. Let us now look at Kenya and Tanzania. Kenya's relationship with Tanzania has shifted from traditional diplomatic observation to a high-stakes regional crisis revolving following Tanzania's October 29, 2025 general elections. The most direct involvement occurred at the Namanga border, where Tanzanian post-election protests spilled into Kenya. On October 30th to 31st, Tanzanian security forces reportedly fired tear gas canisters across the frontier into Kenyan territory while pursuing protesters. This led to 1 casualties, where at least 2 people were reported dead in the border clashes. Trade paralysis also. Cross-border transit goods took to a halt, leaving hundreds of trucks stranded and forcing Kenyan traders to close shops. Refugee influx. Kenyan authorities had to manage a sudden wave of Tanzanians, civilians fleeing across the border to escape the unknown. President William Ruto formally congratulated President Samia Suluhu Hassan on her re-election. His administration faced domestic and regional pressure. Kenya's Trade Minister Lee Kinyanjui expressed alarm that the unrest was impending movement and curtailing investor confidence across the East African community. Kenya's Gen Z protests culture took from into what you saw on news, having been influenced by Tanzanian opposition digital strategy. Kenyan bloggers and activists were highly active in sharing restricted footage of Tanzanian protests and internet shutdowns, acting as a secondary information hub for Tanzanian citizens. The arrest of Kizza Besigye is our next item to look at. The arrest and subsequent rendition of Ugandan opposition leader Dr. Kizza Besigye in Nairobi is one of the most controversial diplomatic events in East Africa over the last year. On November 16th of 2024, Dr. Besigye was in Nairobi to attend a book launch hosted by Kenya's political Martha Karua, whom I call elite. He was reportedly abducted from an apartment complex by an unidentified armed men. His whereabouts remained unknown until he resurfaced 4 days later in a military court in Kampala, Uganda. Besigye and his aide, Haji Obeid Lutale, were initially charged in a military court-martial with security offenses and threatening national security. 2. Illegal possession of firearms and ammunition. And 3. Treachery. This was upgraded to treason. Earlier this year also, after a hunger strike and a Supreme Court of Uganda's ruling that trying civilians in military courts is unconstitutional, his case was transferred to a civilian court. Throughout 2025, he has remained in detention at Luzira Maximum Security Prison with multiple bail applications denied as of August 2025. The incident sparked a major outcry over transnational repression. While the Kenyan government denied formal involvement, critics and human rights groups like Amnesty International accused Nairobi of colluding with Kampala by bypassing formal extradition treaties. This has raised serious concerns about Kenya's reliability as a safe haven for regional dissidents. Let us now look at Kenya United States focus or relations. These two nations have entered a high-stakes realist phase following a shift in American leadership and a pivot in global health and trade strategies. The relationship is currently defined by three critical pillars. One, strategic trade pivot. With the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, set to expire, Nairobi and Washington are racing to finalize a landmark bilateral trade agreement by the end of 2025. This deal seeks to replace traditional aid-based performances with a reciprocal framework focused on digital trade, agriculture, and textiles. However, tensions have emerged over a 10% tariff imposed on some Kenyan goods, either in the shop or at the retailers. On December 4th, 2024, Kenya became the first country to sign a 2.5 billion shilling health agreement under the new America First global health strategy. This shift, funded by NGO, directly to the Kenyan government. While hailed as a move for national sovereignty, it faced an immediate High Court suspension in late 2025 due to civil society concerns regarding medical data privacy and the lack of public transparency. Despite these tensions, Kenya remains the US's primary security anchor in East Africa. While the United States ordered a review of Kenya's major non-NATO ally status in mid-2025, citing concerns over 2025's parliamentary ties with Kenya, the military partnership remains strong, particularly in counterterrorism operations against Al-Shabaab. What about presidential election 2027 race? The race is dominated by a major realignment of political forces and the emergence of a powerful Gen Z voting bloc that threatens the traditional political order. UDA-ODM convergence under this umbrella is the most significant development. Following the broad-based government formed in late 2024, President Ruto expressed confidence in December 2025 that UDA and ODM would form a formal coalition to clinch power in 2027. ODM leadership, including Deputy Party Leader Abdul Somad Sharif Nasir, has initiated formal processes to secure a mandate for these talks. However, this has created internal frictions with some investors like Anyang' Nyong'o insisting that ODM must remain independent and field its own candidate. The United Opposition and Third Way Alliance. Opposed to Raila Odinga Pact is the United Opposition, primarily led by the Wiper's Kalonzo Musyoka. Kalonzo has officially declared his candidacy, and maybe it's just that we haven't gotten here. Oh my. Kalonzo has officially declared his candidacy and emerged as the most preferred opposition figure in recent polls, garnering over 36% support. This group plans to announce a joint flag bearer by the first quarter of 2025. They are positioning themselves as a third way for voters disillusioned by the government's economic policies and the perceived betrayal of traditional opposition. Here comes the Gen Z conundrum. The most unpredictable factor is the influence of the Generation Z. Carrying the momentum from June 2024 finance bill protest, young voters have become hyperactive in demanding systemic reforms rather than just tribal alliances. While their movement remains largely leaderless and outside formal party structures, their one-term slogan and digital activism have played or forced President William Ruto to pivot towards social programs to appease them. Analysts warn that if this strategy translates into high voter registration, it could disrupt the calculated plans of the established elite. Regional alignment also is another issue. Mount Kenya, traditionally a kingmaker region, is currently struggling with internal divisions. Leaders in late 2025 have issued urgent calls for unity to prevent an east-west split within the region, which would diminish its bargaining power. With the falling out between Ruto and former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, the region's 2027 loyalty remains the most sought-after swing factor in the race. Now, let us finish off with Rigathi Gachagua. In 2025, Deputy President, former actually, Rigathi Gachagua embarked on a high-profile tour of the United States, marking his first international trip since his impeachment in late 2024. Traveling with his spouse, Pastor Dorcas Rigathi Gachagua, Gachagua visited several major cities including Seattle, and you remember Pastor Nganga singing about Seattle, Dallas, Boston, Baltimore, and Kansas City. The tour served as a strategic platform for Gachagua to reinvent himself as an opposition leader under the banner of his newly formed Democracy for Citizen Party (DCP) and the One-Term movement. He held numerous town hall meetings with the Kenyan diaspora. His primary objectives included political mobilization, which is rallying support for a potential 2027 presidential bid and positioning himself as a viable alternative to President William Ruto. He sharply criticized the current administration, citing high public debt, corruption, and economic hardship as evidence of a state of the nation crisis. Quoting the influential diaspora vote and encouraging investment partnership was also one other thing that he went out there to do. Although originally planned for 2 months, Gachagua cut the trip short in mid-August, returning to Kenya after 43-day focus on local by-elections, the Wamutendes. Upon his return on August 21st, 2025, he was greeted by supporters at JKIA, maintaining that the entire trip was funded by well-wishers in the United States of America. These were the major headlines of the year 2025. Let us hope for a better 2026 with fewer, if not zero, accidents and better tidings for all of us in politics and even outside of politics. May the economy blossom so that we get something to eat and something to put in our pockets, something to put in the banks for our future investments. Happy New Year.